Ian Garry MVP. Like, there's not a whole lot of fights that you look back on, right? If you ever want to know if somebody did their job, it's not just to count the headlines or the questions at a presser that they get prior to a fight, though those are very good indicators. You can end the argument for who won the day with who gets more headlines when it's over. And that's a very tricky game. Like there's very few fighters that even know what the media cycle is. Right? Travel day is on Tuesday. Press conference Thursday. Weigh-in Friday. Fight on Saturday. Travel home on Sunday. The shows pick up on Monday, thanks to guys like Errol Helwani, Luke Thomas, for example. But by Tuesday, that is now behind us. It's travel day for the next one in 24 hours. I apologize, 48 hours later will be the press conference for that week's show. It is a distant memory. So you can strike, and you can even strike when it's done. But if you don't feel like working, and you don't get something out there prior to Monday afternoon, you're dead in the water. Now, I don't need to go down this whole road. I'm sharing with you. Very few guys even know that that's the case. Very few managers even understand that that is how the media cycle works. Like, we're tired. We'll get back to you. We'll call you the next week. It's like, no, there is no next week. There's going to be 11 other fights this week, and that's the ones I'm going to draw to for the next week. If you don't feel like taking a phone call today, fine, but it's behind us. And Ian Garry has done a good job of keeping this alive. And I just give you, right out of the gate, a tip of the hat. But Garry does not agree that this was a draw. I don't know that I've ever seen a fight that was more clearly a draw. Now, let me qualify that statement and why I'd put it like that. Different commissions and regulators will get together and they'll watch fights or they'll watch rounds. And then the judges that are on the call, often done by Zoom, will start bouncing ideas back and forth as to who had 10 and who had the 9 and why. And some rounds are wildly difficult. Some fights are wildly difficult. But if I was in such a hearing where I had a group of people together and I needed to teach them by showing them what a draw was, I don't know off the top of my head a clearer fight that I would bring forward. I've been following this for 30 years. I cannot think off the top of my head of a fight that would be easier for me to prove my point. This guy won a round. This guy won a round. Then you look at the third. 5-minute round, you have 2.5 minutes, Venom Page. And you have 2.5 minutes. Ian Garry, like, wow. These were shockingly similar. Now, the booth that I was up in watching this fight, we all, after the fight and prior to the decision, looked at each other, right? No different than the living room you were in. Y'all start discussing who do you think won. And we all, even in that 2-minute period, from the horn to Buffer speaking, had come to the same conclusion, which was, this is a draw, but because Ian Garry, though only winning half a round, he won the second half of the round, he will win the fight. We had all come to that conclusion. We'd all followed it enough, and we all understood that after everything, judges are human beings, and the last thing that they see is going to influence them the most. And this was the opinion that we came to. So, Garry, after the fight, has a problem with that. He resists that. Says that he's upset and he's sick about it and that the fight should have been finished. He should have, the very first round when he had his back, put him away. And is that something that guys are going to have to worry about with Ian Garry moving forward? Ian Garry has been a specialist. And by the way, not overly dynamic, very by the book. Excellent kickboxing. He is so clean and he is so crisp. Like, I have a feeling in my heart that Ian Garry is a brawler, but I've never seen it. He's never found himself in a brawl because it's so sharp. Boom, finish with a kick, reset, feint, 1, 2, right down the middle, punches and punches, never touch him once, always touch him multiple times. He must have incredible hips, and it's not a matter of he's just not getting taken down. Guys aren't trying to take him down. There's a threat. He's offering a threat. He's making guys feel uncomfortable because they're not even going for the takedowns. Okay, great. Now I'm just offering for you that we see groundwork by Garry. Oh, and by the way, successful groundwork. Do we have enough to know that future opponents are going to have to worry about these other elements? Because the wrestling was on accident, right? Like it's one of those things where, did Garry want to get him down? It seemed as though, and we would understand if Garry was uncomfortable on his feet with Page, because Page makes everybody uncomfortable. He's offering you a look that you've never seen before. But it wasn't as though Garry set up a takedown, changed elevation, closed the distance, and got him to the mat. It was the in-between. It was a kick by Page, and there's Garry, and Garry falls on top, and now we're on the ground, and we've got to deal with this situation. And there's no critique in what I just said, by the way, from a negative standpoint. There's not a commentary on it. It's just a matter of, if Garry wasn't looking to wrestle, if the wrestling just happened, if he found himself in a position and then dealt with it, I don't know how much you would have to worry about that moving forward. Now, when you're in those moments, like, you'll hear guys say, man, I love fighting. No, I love it. Hey, what's your favorite sport? Fighting. I love it. There's less than 5 in the history of time where that was literal. And each one of those 5, you probably want to stay away from. They got a little bit of sociopath to them to want to go into a cage and do these things. Like, those are 5 weird guys. But when guys talk about they love it, they're talking about the post-fight, what Garry was doing. Having people praise him. Having his strengths pointed out in front of the world. And when you get into those press conferences, you get into those post-fights, there's an adrenaline that causes you to be high, and you start to say things. And it's one of those spots, because when Garry was saying things, it was one thing specifically, and it sounded a lot like Shavkat Rakhmonov. And it just creates for a precarious situation. Now, that fight's not going to get made. But I am equally as strong that fight's not going to get made, which is pretty well at full confidence as somebody on the inside of this sport who's also been watching it from the outside from its inception. I can tell you with equal confidence, MVP versus Ian Garry isn't going to get made. I mean, I didn't see that coming at all. I thought it was going to be Colby followed by protect Ian Garry, which MVP is anything but a protection, right? I mean, it's one of those spots. And the UFC as a brand has been hard and disciplined from day one that we put the best against the best. And so many times people thought that was going to be marketing, but when push comes to shove, we're going to get these guys, they're going to have these inflated records like boxers, 20-0, 25-0, 30-0, 40-0, just ridiculousness. But nearly every time we got confronted with that, we went to the absolute hardest guy, even when it was our star and our champion, who would be bad for the books. If he came off the board, and if you put him with this guy and or this style, he's coming off the books, and we still made the match. So when you have Ian Garry call out Rakhmonov and you have Rakhmonov respond, it just creates for a tough position. Like, if you didn't make that fight, the media would then have the right to say, why didn't you make that fight? And you can have whatever answer you wanted. At the end of the day, you have a guy that's completely undefeated who called out this guy who's completely undefeated and accepted. You can start from scratch and you can send this Rakhmonov guy in a different direction and go build and put out the pieces and see how they catch on social media. And then you can do the same with Ian Garry, and you can go find a Jack Dale Lema or whoever it is that you want to do and redo the same thing. Or you can run with the marketing that's already been organically created, which is the single best marketing you have, or you cannot, but you're going to be forced with the question, why didn't you? There's nothing about these guys. From rankings to records to placement to youth to longevity, there's nothing about them that would disqualify or cross it out. And now you have one guy and he called out the other guy. Oh, and by the way, this guy accepted. Like, you're in a bit of a spot. It's a little bit of a spot. So while I'm very confident in telling you that isn't the fight, there are times through history where you will have somebody that sure looks a lot like a star, and you change the path just a little bit. You got this other stud, and he's the champion, and you can do that big fight. It's going to be the championship fight. But this one is oddly unique in that neither one of them is the champion. It's not as though there's going to be a build and then we fight for a title someday. Like, neither one of them has the title. So to do an elimination bout for contenders is quite literally what they are by definition. They're both contenders who are undefeated in the same weight class, under contract with the same company. You have a call out. You have an accepted call out. Your Honor, your witness.